Let's bring into the conversation CTV political analyst Scott Reid joining me here in studio. Scott, let's start with Mr. Jagmeet Singh. He's technically the new kid on the block and seems to be, I guess, the target here in the sense that he's new to the game. He waited quite a long time to say he was going to put his hat into the ring. What did you make of his performance?
Well, I thought it was really interesting. In many ways, he's the expectations frontrunner. We don't know. We don't have a way of measuring new membership signups or, any sort of huge flurry of endorsements. We don't know who's really in front. But he's the expectations frontrunner. He's the person that people were waiting to see if he would enter the race, and if he entered the race, if he would be the kind of person that would elevate the entire race and, lead a movement. He is under fire here. We see him hard under fire, and I thought he was more assertive in this debate. I think he got more natural, more in control, and more in command of the stage at the outset of the debate. But he got rocked twice hard with direct questions, and he looked like the worst thing in the world. You know what he looked like? He looked like a politician because he didn't want to give direct answers to the question of whether or not he'll support Kinder Morgan.
A dodger.
Dodging on that, and then says that he'll come back with a hard opinion, to be fair to him, but said he didn't want to give it today because he wants to consult with the NDP in both British Columbia and Alberta, and they're at odds on that question. And then secondly, was unwilling to answer the direct question, which I think he's going to have to correct this and correct it quickly, and unwilling to answer the direct question of whether he'll run as a federal candidate in the next election, regardless of whether or not he is the leader, meaning will he also forfeit his seat in the Ontario legislature? He didn't want to answer that question, and that was plain as day, and I think Charlie Angus really stung him on that.
Yeah, Charlie Angus did stick him on that. We have that on tape, so let's take a look at that and come back.
It's a simple question. We're getting set for an election in Ontario where they're going for government, and we have to be at the federal level ready to go. You have to make a decision. And I guess I'm asking you this because you're telling Canadians to have courage and join you. I would suggest that you could show courage and tell us, are you going to join us? Simple question.
Sometimes people can't take yes for an answer. I said, yes, I will absolutely continue to fight, not only in my writing. It's not your turn, my friend. It's not your turn, my friend. It's, I will continue to fight in the provincial level. I'll continue to fight in other provinces. I'll continue to fight on the federal level, as I've done before, as my track record shows. I'll continue to do that because that's what New Democrats need to do. And I would be honored to continue to do that. As long as the people give me this beautiful opportunity, I will continue to serve in any way I can to make sure that our progressive views are...
Thank you.
All right, so often, well, this was the feistiest bit of this back and forth debate, but often, as you know, when you have a leadership debate, everybody's on the same side, meaning they're all pretty much on the same side as far as the issues go, and it's hard for one person to distinguish themselves among the others. What did you think of this? Did anybody sort of stand out above the crowd?
Well, I thought two people really caught my attention today. One was Singh, because of these moments, but in some ways, these moments also highlight his divergence from the rest of the candidates in the sense that he's not quite as hard left as them. I mean, he was using code words. He was trying to say, look, I think that we have to focus on unity. We need to unite approaches with the BC NDP and with the Alberta NDP. We'll see if he can bridge that divide. That's a pretty hard policy divide. And I think it was very interesting. He's clearly a more centrist, more unifying figure. The rest of this race sounds left. Okay, this could be an NDP leadership campaign from 1976. Pretty hard left. Nikki Ashton, Charlie Angus, these guys are real good hard left, hard populist fighters, and they sounded strong today.
Yeah, I'm going to say they're old school, and I think the reason for that is Tom Mulcair. Many of the NDP base members thought that Mr. Mulcair moved too much to the centre, chasing the Liberals, and so they wanted somebody who was more old school, more aligned with the policies they've taken up in the past. This candidates, the stage we had today, represented that, and I think that's what the candidates are playing to.
Well, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what the membership have to say about this ultimately. I mean, this is really the fundamental. There's been an existential question that's hung over the NDP for the last number of years. They decided, look, we've got all these members in Quebec because of the 2011 election, almost an unexpected turn of events. Le Bon Jacques, Jack turned popular overnight, boom, wins all those seats in Quebec. They suddenly have a base there. They pick Tom Mulcair. They say, we can put ourselves in government. Now, what does the party want to be? That experiment failed. right? The Tom Mulcair experiment failed. So are they going to go hard left? Charlie Angus, very persuasive guy. Nikki Ashton, very persuasive, also very left, also very traditional in the sense of we're going to be content to appeal to 20% of the population. We're not going to appeal to 48% of the population. Jagmeet Singh says, let's win. Let's be centrist. Let's be there in the middle. I think that's going to be a collision of fundamental values in the party.
All right, let me ask you, now that we know who's going to be leading the Conservatives, and we already are presuming that it'll still be Trudeau next time around in the election, is this about, does Andrew Scheer being in that position sort of change the way now these candidates are going to look at,
right.
Or is it all about Trudeau?
I think it's all about Trudeau. Yeah. I actually think this race is more important. This NDP leadership is in many ways more important to the outcome of the 2019 election than the Conservative one.
Why is that?
Because I think that the NDP, a potent, more agile NDP, has the ability to take votes away from the Liberals in places that will matter. I mean, if you take a look at what's happening, this is held in St. John's, Newfoundland. The NDP have started to ebb a little bit in Atlantic Canada after what was a strong showing for 5, 10 years. You get a hard left populist leader who can nail, the soundbite like a Charlie Angus, right? Or somebody like Jagmeet Singh from a different stream who elevates people. They take every vote they get, they're going to be taken from the Liberals. So I'm not sure Scheer figures into it, but he may be the beneficiary of a really strong NDP leadership race, which produces a strong NDP leader that can punish Trudeau at the polls.
Yeah, that can crack things up, I guess, and sort of fracture a vote on the left-hand side.
If you're running a Liberal campaign, and I've done them in the past, if you're running a Liberal campaign, job number one in an election campaign is to make certain that the NDP are at 15% or below. That's what you want, because when the NDP get at 20% or above, Liberals cannot win.
All right. It's interesting. I hear you say the word elevate every time. And it really does come down to that. Who from this party can elevate the discussion, elevate the debate, and be the leader?
No question about it. And what does that mean to you as an NDP member? Does that mean someone like Jagmeet Singh, who's interesting, who's young, who seems full of energy, who's going to bring people together? Or does it mean someone like Charlie Angus or Nikki Ashton, much more populist, much more traditional side of the party? On the other hand, they also sound a lot more like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, don't they? Right? Give them hell, let's go. What is the taste of the NDP these days? What exactly are they looking for? The race is going to decide that.
Yeah, we won't find out till the fall, though. Scott Rizzo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.